Hello to anyone watching this. It's been so lovely keeping up with all the Mario Kart World news this week, constantly refreshing the Mario wiki page and watching people's footage of all the rallies and courses. It's all just so exciting, but the well is starting to run a bit dry at this point. At least until the Direct next week when the cycle inevitably starts again, but for now we've seen all 50 currently confirmed characters. People have managed to piece together what all the Grand Prix are going to be, and the existence of a Rainbow Road has even been leaked. So I feel like it's the perfect time to move on to the next step of speculation. So today I just wanted to lay out some ideas I had for what this game's DLC season could look like. Which I do feel the need to say before I go any further that I absolutely do not think this game has earned a hypothetical moment in next week's Direct where they're like, oh, and if you think this game is big enough, wait till you see all the DLC we have, wow! I have absolutely no skin in this overall pricing debate because I've already pre-ordered the Switch 2 and Mario Kart World Bundle, but to sum up my overall opinions on it, I think that if Nintendo want to raise their prices to match March 2017 inflation, just go for it, babes. You're clearly willing to risk losing potential customers over it, so try it out. If it works, it works. If it doesn't, I suppose. But anyway, the main reason that I wanted to talk about DLC now is just because I really love seeing games get expanded upon, and especially with World's radically different approach to being a Mario Kart game, I think there's so much potential for more tracks to be added and reinterpreted in the future. And of course, it does look like all crossover content has been cut, so, this is probably the way it's going to be added back in. And this video in general is just a good platform to give out some of my opinions on what we've seen of the game so far. So yeah, the last thing I feel like we need to go through before getting into the DLC packs is what the base game character roster is going to look like, because we've obviously seen all of the tracks, so the last thing that could possibly be added onto at this point is the character selection. And of course kart selection, but we're already approaching 40 with that, so I think if it just gets up to 50 and we get 10 more really cool new kart designs, I'll be happy. But anyway, in terms of base game character roster, I think this group of 70 is what we could end up with. I've chucked back in all of the remaining Tour and 8 Deluxe characters, as well as a few extra newcomers in the 6th row, which fall in line with what we've seen with a lot of the already confirmed newcomers, where they are hazards in the free roam sectional tracky bits. Now obviously this selection is purely speculation, and we could end up with just the 50 characters that we've already seen, which I would be quite happy with overall, apart from the fact that we'd be stuck with just Donkey Kong in terms of Kong representation again. But I feel like there's a good chance that we will see more characters, because especially the Koopalings and Kongs I feel like would have taken up a lot of space in the demo character roster. Like, I think they wanted to put a heavy spotlight on all the wacky newcomers. There are still only 24 racers per race, so they wanted to make sure as many of those slots as possible could be filled with your cheeps and pokies, which is fair enough, and I'm just gonna keep my fingers crossed and run with that logic until my heart is inevitably broken next week. But you know what, at the end of the day, it just fills me with so much joy that I can guess that the new Mario Kart game will have 70 characters and not feel like I'm being totally unrealistic, so yeah, there's still that at least. And before we move on, I do just want to quickly talk about the Miis, because I think there's a good chance they're going to be handled incredibly differently in this game compared to before. Because obviously a good portion of the main roster have a lot of different costumes this time, just like the Miis did in 8 Deluxe. And considering that a lot of them are obtained through a food item rather than scanning amiibos or purchasing DLC, I think the Miis could be like a fully customizable character this time. At least in terms of being able to pick out the suits and helmets that you want, or if you of course don't want a helmet at all this time, please let that be a feature. But yeah, I just feel like when you're racing as a Mii and you collect food, you know, what is it going to do? Is it going to give you like a generic touring or pro racer themed outfit, or is it going to give you a costume based on a different character? Or if Kamek rocks up and tries to change your character, will you instead be given like the Charging Chuck or Spike Mii racing suit rather than being fully turned into that character? You know, I think they're going to be treated differently than everyone else more than ever before. So yeah, I'm really excited to see how that could be handled. Or if they're just going to not be included at all because of all the hassle, and in that case just swap it out for a Luma or something. Also, can I just point out that in Mario Kart Tour, the wide selection of Mii racing suits included ones for Cheep Cheep, Fishbones, Dolphin, Spike, Rocky Wrench, Moo Moo, Piranha Plant, Pokey, and Parabidibud. Like, were there notes being handed between the World and Tour teams so they could secretly tease what characters were going to be included in the future? Because that's just like star aligning type of luck if they just had no idea that some of these characters were going to be put into World as, you know, fully just their own thing. But anyway, let's get into the DLC packs that I think we could see, and I'm going to start with just how much extra content I think we could get. I'm going to guess that there's going to be 5 DLC packs, each of which are going to add a extra small portion free roam area that houses 4 courses and hopefully a battle map. Like, we have seen N64 Big Donut and Wii Thwomp Desert on the map, but we haven't seen anything else, and I feel like a lot of battle maps would stick out if they were a part of this map. So I think worst case scenario, we're just going to be stuck playing battle mode on some of the courses, which, to be fair, I don't think will be quite as bad as in Base 8, because obviously all of these tracks have extra areas that go around them that could be integrated into these battle maps. And so I think they'd play more like New York Minute B or Paris Promenade B from Mario Kart Tour, where, yeah, you're obviously playing on racetracks, but because of all the interconnected parts, it kind of has the same vibe as 3DS Woohoo Town, so it's perfectly harmless to play on. So yeah, I just really hope that we can get more battle maps either way, and just in general a proper battle mode. I do believe we've seen the emblem for Balloon Battle during the Treehouse Live footage, but apart from that we have no idea about what it could include, so hopefully we'll know more about that through the Direct. But what we do already know about is the selection of retro courses in the base game, which currently doesn't include anything from either Super Circuit or 8, apart from technically Sky High Sunday, but I definitely count that as more of a tour course. So yeah, when picking out retros for all of these packs, while I did try to give every game at least something, I've given those 2 games more than their fair share of courses, which is hopefully understandable. But on top of all the coursey stuff, I'm going to put 4 characters into each of these packs as well. Now, we have seen that there's going to be a split between characters that do get costumes and don't get costumes, and I'm going to keep rolling with that for these DLC packs. Like, it would be nice if everyone could get full costumes, but, you know, by the time you get to someone like Pokey, I mean, what are you going to put on him that's not going to feel contrived? So I do think it's a fair enough way to go about things, but at the same time I do hope that we get alternate forms of characters like Snow Pokey, Stone and Fire Spike, Fire, Boomerang and Ice Bro, you know, all that sort of thing that may be counted as completely separate characters rather than costumes or something silly. But anyway, 4 characters in each pack, some of which will have costumes. And also there'll hopefully be more costumes for the base roster and more cards, but I'm not going to go into what we could see in that regard because, you know, I think it's just sort of a case of the more the merrier there. It doesn't really matter what it is as long as we get it and it's related to the theme of each pack. So getting into where these packs could fit in on the map, I think these 5 spots would be the best, you know, especially if each extra free roam area is kind of triangular. It means that the map will look like a giant star by the end, which is very thematic, especially because the dead center of the current world has a star-shaped lake. So I'm not going to say it's hinting at the final map looking like a star, but I'm just going to run with it anyway, and especially the areas that each pack is going to branch off of will definitely give each of them a very unique feel, especially if they keep up with the kind of biomes that each of those areas have. And in terms of getting to each of them, I think if there's just some sort of land or water bridge to like an extra little island, I think that's the best way of doing it, you know. Obviously, if people don't have the DLC, you need some sort of natural way to wall it off for them, whether it's just not including the DLC area on the map unless you're playing an online race, or just having the bridges be completely inaccessible, you know. I think if you can just communicate, like, yeah, you're not getting here unless you pay, it's a bit harsh, but, you know, it's just life. So yeah, each pack's 4 courses and hopefully battle map will just kind of be scattered naturally into the free roam areas, and each track can be connected to each other using those sectional parts, and they'll hopefully also be able to connect back to some of the base game courses, which should mean that you'll be able to get 2 Grand Prix in each of these DLC packs. You know, obviously one of them will have to involve base game courses, or, you know, both cups could be a mix of DLC and base game courses at different times of day and stuff like that. And I also really hope that it'll provide new knockout tour rallies, because I feel like I've seen no one point out the fact that there are only 8 in the demo, and it really doesn't look like there's much opportunity, at least menu-wise, to add in more unless they add a second page, which I really hope they do, because, like, 8 is simply not enough, and it's going to get really boring really quickly, especially online. So yeah, just in general, I really hope that we can get more knockout tours in the base game and of course in DLC. So let's get into the first pack, which, like, this could all be chronological or it could just be in any order, but in general I think it would be nice if each of these areas could be added clockwise going around the map. So starting in the top left corner, we have the Bonanza pack, based on the upcoming Donkey Kong Bonanza, which this is going to somehow contain a spoiler for that game. So if you want to be a good boy or girl about all this, then you can just skip on to the next pack. But anyway, starting with the tracks, we have Ingot Isle, which just looks like a fun area. Could be a cool mine-based course. You know, we haven't had a new one of them in a while. I'm not good at coming up with new tracks, to be honest. You know, when I suggest these things, it's more about the kind of free roam experience you could have around it, and I'm just sort of given what I get with new courses a lot of the time. So yeah, when I suggest these things, it's more about the kind of vibes they can add to the game, you know. So moving on to our next course, we just have a kind of forest treehouse course, which I feel like could be different to Wild Woods or this game's Acorn Heights, because it could be more based on a rainforest, which would be cool. And in this sort of area, we could also see Wee Funky Stadium, which I think if it was given a more natural feeling look, it would be way more interesting thematically. Like, I do appreciate Funky Stadium enough as it is. I just think that, you know, it could get an extra boost by having some plant life tucked into it. And then moving on to our first retro course, we have Wii U Thwomp Ruins, which I think is definitely going to be reinterpreted in a fun way, because obviously in its original you had all the alternate anti-gravity wall sections, which in this game are just going to be wall riding sections. So it can still have its same emphasis on split paths, it's just going to be in a kind of different way in this game. And obviously its main anti-gravity section can quite easily have that taken away from it, because it wasn't too much of a steep incline to begin with. So yeah, our final course is N64 Bowser Castle, which will obviously be quite close to the base game's Bowser Castle, and I think will provide a good contrast to it, because from what we've seen, the new Bowser Castle seems to have quite a factory feel to it, so I think this more relatively homely feeling Bowser Castle would be nice to see. And also in the area surrounding it, if they're not in the base game, I think this would be the best place to put in all of the SNES Bowser Castles, just as a part of the free roam world, like the Vanilla Lake, Choco Island and Ghost Valley courses. And in terms of characters, I think this bunch would be the best to represent both Bonanza and Donkey Kong as a series. You know, hopefully the more interesting characters here aren't going to have to be replaced by Diddy, Funky and Dixie Kong just so they can get in this game. But, you know, I think this is just the perfect selection of 4 to clip onto what we will hopefully already have in the base game's character roster. So moving on to the next pack, located at the north of the map, we have the Animal Crossing pack, which does sort of give away what the general tone of the rest of these packs are going to be, but still, that's all for later. For now, our first track here is Wii U Animal Crossing, always one of my favourites from that game, and it's one that I always wanted to explore, with its like train in the background and lovely beach area that spans a lot wider than we actually get to race on. So yeah, this is one that's going to be really enhanced by free roam. And in terms of all of its seasonal variants being included, I think since all of them take place at different times of day in 8, I think like over the course of one in-game day you can just go through each of the different seasons, and yeah, that's just sort of the best way you can still integrate them. So moving on, our next course is an Animal Crossing City themed course, which, yeah, we do already have Crown City in this game, but this one's going to be really different because here you'll race through all the different shops that you see in Animal Crossing games, so it'll kind of have more of a Coconut Mall vibe to it, which is always nice to have. Now, as for the other courses in this pack, I really want to lean into the fact that this new area is going to branch off from Boo Cinema and include some spooky themed tracks, which would just be a great juxtaposition to the cutesy Animal Crossing stuff. So firstly for that we have DS Luigi's Mansion, which is, you know, always a favourite, always lovely to see, and again I think will be really enhanced by free roam, where you could maybe drive up to all of the different mansions from Dark Moon, or maybe the giant hotel from Luigi's Mansion 3, and also maybe 3DS Honeybee Hive, this pack's battle map, which I couldn't think of any other natural segues into. You know, I've always loved this one as well, and I think if Stingbee is going to be a playable character, he deserves his own home stage, so this is the perfect opportunity for that. And the final course here, I just have be like a spooky boardwalk themed track, which is a theme that hasn't gotten a new variant since Super Circuit, so I think it's high time we got a truly next-gen version of that course theme. So moving on to the characters, obviously Villager and Isabelle need to come back, both of whom I'd be incredibly excited to see get a massive suite of costumes. Like, especially Isabelle has so many amazing looks throughout the Animal Crossing series that just deserve to be playable in some form in some game that's not bloody Amiibo Festival. And with Villager, it might get a bit complicated with him, because obviously in 8 you have both the male and female versions, so they might have to be split up here, because like, yeah, you can change your style to being a boy or a girl whenever you want in New Horizons, but I think eating a burger and having that happen may be a bit more unexplainable here, so I don't know how they're gonna roll with costumes for them. Maybe it'll just have to be boy Villager, and then when we inevitably add Inkling it could just be girl Inkling, but like, you get what I mean, right? It's just sort of a bit of a complicated situation with them. But anyway, Tom Nook makes the most sense to be the third Animal Crossing rep, and Egad finally getting a chance to be playable in a Mario game would be lovely to see. But moving on to the next pack, in the top right area of the map, we have the Splatoon pack, which at first might feel a bit weird to have in a general snowy area, but it'll make a lot more sense when you see that the first course here is Alterna, which is of course a nice snowy area, and just in general feels like another really fun place to both race on and explore, going between all the different icebergs and having loads of fun water sections. It should be a fun time. The next course is the Order sector, which would have a quite similar vibe to DK Spaceport, in the sense of it being a 5 or 6 section long track, where each section has a near identical layout, except instead of straight lines it would be square floors going up a tower, and the main difference between them all would be the hazards you encounter. So this would be where you get a lot of cameos from various Splatoon villains and enemies, and yeah, I think it would be really cool, even if there wouldn't be much visual variety unless a load of Inklings come in and paint it all. And this is probably the best place to mention the battle course, which would of course be one plucked straight from Splatoon. And I went with Wahoo World, which would probably need to be upscaled to fit 24 players, but I just think this would be a really good fit for this game, like with all of its moving parts and potential for loads of rails to be put in to grind on for quick traversal. I just think it would be really neat. But moving on to the next race course, which I'd have you traverse up to using a giant airflow, just like with Great Question Block Ruins, it's GBA Sky Garden! And by GBA Sky Garden, I do of course mean actual GBA Sky Garden this time. Like, especially with the feather coming back as a race item, it just feels like there's so many amazing opportunities for shortcuts on this track that I really hope they let you take advantage of this time, and yeah, I just think this course definitely deserves a third chance. And moving on to the final course, I'd again have you traverse all the way up to on an airflow. It's GBA Rainbow Road, which does mean that this pack will have multiple GBA courses, but you know, the Animal Crossing pack on Mario Kart 8 Wii U did that, so I think it's perfectly fair game to have that happen again, and I think GBA Rainbow Road also deserves another chance in the spotlight, especially if there's no retro Rainbow Road in the base game. And I think if there is any sort of free roam area attached to this course, I hope it includes SNES Rainbow Road somewhere. As for the characters, of course Inkling gets to come back, but I also included Big Man and Small Fry as more unique feeling representatives for Splatoon, rather than just more Inklings / Octolings in the form of the other idols. And also I included Honey Queen, like, mainly because she just in general deserves to come back at this point, but in terms of making her make sense to include in this pack, you know, maybe Sky Garden could have more of a buggy theme to it this time. So getting on to the next pack, in the bottom right area of the map, we have the Pikmin pack, which is definitely the most deserving next Nintendo series to be included in Mario Kart in my opinion, just based on its potential for track design. So getting straight into that, we have Blossoming Arcadia, a lovely giant forest themed track, and then you can drive up to a giant house for Hero's Hideaway, which would just sort of be the living room / kitchen version of Squeaky Clean Sprint or GBA Ribbon Road off 8, but still, you know, I absolutely adore both of those courses, so to have another of its kind in this game would be great to see, and who knows, maybe in free roam you'll be able to drive upstairs and visit the areas those tracks are based on. But on the garden patio of this hypothetical house, I definitely want to include N64 Block Fort as this pack's battle map. You know, give it a total thematic revamp here, because I really don't think they'd be able to get away with making it just a giant floating structure in this game. So moving on to the next race course, we have 3DS Maka Woohoo, which is definitely the one I'm most iffy about including in this, like, entire video, because, you know, they'd probably have to bring back the entirety of Woohoo Island as a free roam area in this game to include Maka Woohoo, and I'm just not sure they'd have, like, the conviction to give it all the love it deserves, you know? but at the same time they can't just have Makawoohoo as its own like weird off to the side course. So yeah, I really want to see it. I just hope that it gets everything it deserves in its inclusion. And the last course here is GCN Luigi Circuit. A bit of a basic pick, but for me this has kind of the same vibes as Baby Park in the Wii U DLC, where there's just so much chaos to be found in housing a 24-player race here that I just really think deserves to be tapped into. And as for this pack's new characters, I feel like Olimar, Pikmin and Bulborb are just the 3 best representatives for the Pikmin series. I will say I could see Olimar being replaced with one of the generic captains you can make in Pikmin 4, and that would probably be the best way to give them costumes, because then you could like change their entire face at the same time, so it feels more like you have loads of different captains to play as, all with unique looks. But I'd still rather go for Olimar at the end of the day. And similarly with Pikmins, I can see them being treated similarly to Yoshi, where each different colour Pikmin has a little costume piece attached to it to make it feel like a full costume and worth changing to when you eat some food. And Noki, I just think, is a really cute character in general, and since Pianta is here and, you know, both them and Noki were playable in the baseball games, I just feel like it's right to chuck her in. So moving on to the final pack for today, located in the bottom left area of the map, it is of course the Zelda pack, and I feel like based on its overall location on the world map, the best course to start with here is Gerudo Valley, you know, one of the coolest valley areas in any game. It definitely feels like the most deserving choice for a second Zelda themed course. But, you know, we do need to include the original as well with Wii U Hyrule Circuit, which I definitely feel like will benefit a lot from being a part of an open free roam area. Like the field and mountainous sections should feel a lot more natural if they're connected to full-on Hyrule Field and Death Mountain themed areas. And obviously the anti-gravity puzzle shortcut is going to have to be removed here. But I do still think something like that could be included, but this time you could include buttons on both of the walls going down the stairs, so you'll need multiple players wall riding to hit them, meaning that first place can't just take advantage of it. You know, it's going to help people at the back of the pack way more this time, which I think is just a much better way to go about it, and it should feel like a lot more of a puzzle trying to see where exactly all of the buttons are on each of the walls so you can hit them in the most efficient way possible. So yeah, I just feel like Hyrule Circuit is going to get a massive glow up just by virtue of having to work with World's mechanics. But anyway, another biome that could branch off from this course is a forest area, which could house Kokiri Forest, the only non-retro battle map I'm going to suggest here, which does mean I have very few ideas for what its overall layout could be, but you know, if we just get to go through some tree trunks and visit all of the cute little villages, it should be perfectly fun. Now as for the last 2 tracks I'm going to include here, both of them have a kind of island theme going on. Starting with Tour Yoshi's Island, which is another one that doesn't really need any layout changes. It's just going to be really fun to explore in free roam mode. And my final course for today is just a kind of desert island beach track, which could be based on Eventide Island from Breath of the Wild, but I've tried to limit myself to just 2 race courses per series represented here, so it might have to be generic, but I still think it could be perfectly fun, you know, especially if it keeps some sort of pirate motif. But lastly, with the characters for this pack, Zelda more than ever feels like she deserves to have a slot in Mario Kart, with her main character appearances in Echoes of Wisdom last year and Hyrule Warriors Age of Imprisonment this year. It really just feels like her time, and Moblin feels like the perfect little guy minion to include as well, and Raphael the Raven feels like a really quirky Yoshi's Island pick, so yeah, this is definitely the set of 4 characters I'd be most set on including. So yeah, that's everything I wanted to go through for today. I just want to make it clear that this isn't meant to be any kind of firm prediction for what I think is going to appear as DLC. This is just kind of a general idea for how each of the packs could be laid out content-wise. And like I said, I do really hope that this game can be expanded upon. Not that I fear it's not going to be big enough at launch, I just think that any game deserves to have more content added in after its release, as long as it's not distributed in a scummy way. I just can't wait for the game at this point, and I really wanted to take an opportunity to talk about it at length before the Direct next week. Even though everything here is going to become outdated incredibly quickly, you know, I just like putting all of my rambly thoughts out there to see how right or wrong I end up being. But yeah, if you have any questions or concerns, do let me know. I do think the part of each DLC pack I'd be most excited for would be all of the new costumes. Like, there's just so many opportunities for fun crossovers, like a Keese costume for Swoop, a Deku Barber for Piranha Plant, and who knows, maybe there could be a Mr. Grizz costume for Bowser to make him more endearing than ever. Bye-bye. Have a nice day.